Hey guys, Daniel from our reviews here, and in this video we're going to see if the iPad Pro 10.5 inch from 2017 is still worth it in 2020. So, I recently did an iPhone 6s review in 2020, but this has more updated specs than the iPhone 6s, so this will definitely hold up better compared to that. So as you know, I did a video on this fairly recently. Only in June 2019 is when I did a review on this iPad Pro, which was already 2 years old at the time, so it's almost 3 years old. So we're gonna see how it holds up now in May 2020, almost a year after I did that video, and when this is almost 3 years old, to see if it's still worth it in 2020. So the first thing, of course, we're gonna look at is the design. So since Apple has new iPad Pros now with bezel-less screens, this might look a little bit outdated to many people. You have the Touch ID home button right there. We have the lightning port, 2 stereo speakers on the bottom, 2 stereo speakers on the top, microphones, headphone jack. We have the on-off switch right there, and we have the volume buttons right there. We have a 12 megapixel iSight camera with an LED flash that can do 4K. This is 4K on the rear camera, but of course, because of the screen, it doesn't really look 4K. Here's some photos. This is what it looks like in the daylight. And this is in low light with the flash. And we have a 5 megapixel FaceTime camera that can do 1080p. This is the front facing camera right here, which is 1080p, which is a pretty good camera. Definitely not the best, but not the worst either. Here's a photo on the FaceTime camera. Now, of course, with an iPad, especially with this type of screen, you definitely wouldn't be using the camera that much. Just don't attempt to do this. So definitely overall, I would say it's a pretty good camera. So as for the screen, we have a 10.5 inch screen, and we have 2264 by 1668 pixels. That's 264 pixels per inch. So that's still a pretty good screen for 2020 standards. Not the best, but far from the worst. So overall, this is definitely a really doable screen. And of course, it also has the 120 Hz refresh rate, which means navigating through the software is wicked fast, and overall makes the experience much smoother. On the inside, this has a hexa-core A10X chip that's clocked at 2.34 GHz with 4 GB of RAM. So even in 2020, this is still considered pretty powerful. We're going to run a Geekbench test to see how well the A10X chip still holds up in 2020. So as you can see, we have a single core score of 840 and a multi-core score of 2300. Even in 2020, these are still decent specs, and you add that up with the 120 Hz refresh rate, and the iPad Pro 10.5 inch still feels really fast. No, definitely not as fast as the newer iPads, but it's still a pretty fast iPad. Even in 2020, if you bought one, it would still run butterly smooth. Add that up with the fact that this has the 120 Hz refresh rate, it would just feel like it's an iPad that was released in 2020. So it's still definitely a very powerful iPad. So playing heavy games like Minecraft or Fortnite, doing movie editing, photo editing, things like that are going to be extremely smooth on this, and even for the next couple of iPadOS updates, they're probably still going to be fairly smooth and fast. So if you want to buy this for more intense things, I'd say it's still worth it in 2020. This has a 8,134 milliamp battery, and honestly, it's decent at best. It's definitely not the greatest. However, I have been bashing it a little too much recently because I use the iPad a lot. I do a lot of gaming on it. Well, really just playing Minecraft. I'm consuming a lot of media, and then other times I'm on LumaFusion making YouTube videos. So part of the reason why the battery life on here might not be the greatest is just because of how I use it. Overall, the battery life on here is decent, and honestly, I would say you're not really going to have any issues with the battery on this. This only supports the first generation Apple Pencil, which is a good stylus except for the fact that it's not as technologically advanced as the second generation Apple Pencil, and of course the awkward charging method. The Apple Pencil first generation still works very well. It's very accurate and works well with many drawing apps, the Notes app, and Photos app. One of the big selling points about the iPad Pro when it was released back in 2015 was that it could replace a laptop. So originally I was going to say that iPadOS could not replace your laptop, but last week I used this for schoolwork, and honestly I actually think that for many people it could. Personally, I don't think iPadOS is there just yet, but it's definitely closer than it's ever been. The App Store is iPadOS's biggest strength. You will find basically any creativity app. For doing art, movie editing, and photo editing, iPadOS could probably replace your laptop depending on your needs, and the iPad Pro from 2017 is definitely no exception. So as I said earlier, last week I decided to put it to the test to see if I could replace my laptop with iPadOS for schoolwork. On iPadOS 13, you can get the Mac version of Safari, meaning you can get a desktop web browsing experience. The full version of Google's software programs are available, such as Google Maps, Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Classroom, which are all far more functional than the watered-down mobile versions. Now, doing schoolwork on here is possible, but definitely more inefficient. As you can see, Academic Workspace, I click Google Drive and it takes me to the mobile version, and it's not even on my school account, it's on my regular account. Then I click on the Google Docs icon and it takes me to the mobile watered down version. Something I notice is when I completely close Safari and open it again, I'm signed out, which has never been a problem on my Mac. Of course, Adobe Flash doesn't work on iPadOS, unlike macOS, Android, or Windows, but that's irrelevant now as Adobe Flash is going to be gone in December. To access the full Google Docs, you have to search for it, and that leads you to the desktop version, which for the most part works. iPadOS now has mouse support, so writing docs on the iPad nowadays definitely works decently. I have yet to get a Bluetooth mouse, but I plan on getting one in the near future to see how this works. Just got off a conference call, and honestly, it works just as good as it does on a laptop. Obviously, the difference is I gotta use my hand, but now that I could use a wireless mouse for my iPad, I definitely think I could probably replace my laptop for Google Hangouts. Now, after using Google Hangouts a little bit further on this thing, I can definitely say that it really isn't that great on here. The reason why I say that is because you cannot screen share using Google Hangouts on here, and the other day I was having audio problems when using it, so I had to go on my laptop when it wasn't having audio problems. So that definitely is a downside on here. Despite the limitations, I do find that the iPad Pro 10.5-inch is still a good side device when doing schoolwork. I play a lot of Roblox, and my favorite game on Roblox is Ultimate Driving, which is not playable on mobile yet. Roblox is far more functional on desktop than mobile. I'm also a road geek and love making highway signs using PaintX, which is basically Microsoft Paint for Mac, and there's no app on iPadOS that's like this. So for me, iPadOS cannot replace my laptop for these things. But again, movie editing with LumaFusion, doing art with Procreate, editing photos, even running a YouTube channel, despite that little bug right there. This could definitely replace a laptop. Of course, doing tablet things like watching videos or browsing the internet or playing App Store games, especially with the 120Hz refresh rate, it's almost unbeatable. So overall, I would definitely say that the iPad Pro 10.5-inch from 2017 is still worth it in 2020. I mean, definitely not a laptop replacement yet. Personally, I just don't think iPadOS is ready to really compete with macOS and Windows. It's just too limited, and you could make it work, but it'd be inefficient compared to a desktop OS. Then again, if that's true for this iPad, then it's true for the new 2020 iPad Pro, which is a lot more expensive. Using this as an iPad, or just simply as a tablet, I would definitely say this is probably a good deal. If you can find a refurbished one, or one of these that are being sold somewhere, I would definitely go for it, because in 2020, it's still a really powerful tablet. It still has the 120Hz refresh rate, the A10X chip is still very powerful. It's still running the latest version of iPad OS 13.5, and is probably still going to get updated for the next few years. And of course, doing things like movie editing, gaming, browsing the web, going through social media, things like those, it'll still feel really smooth and it'll be quick doing all those things. And yeah, this is definitely an iPad that I think is still worth it in 2020. Yeah, the design might seem a little bit old, but you know what? It seems we're very picky with technology nowadays. Personally, I find this design is absolutely fine, honestly. I mean, then again, I've never used a new iPad Pro, so I can't say. But overall, I would definitely say this iPad is still valuable and still worth it in 2020. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. That's it. See you guys.